The pastorate is the only profession in the United States where the employer is forbidden by law from withholding Social Security and Medicare tax from them. The pastor has to pay both halves themselves.
Okay, so you just finished chapter 1 of the Tax Man Cometh, and we have Scott here with us. Scott, tell us about chapter 1, where you talk about the Pastoral Tax Myth, and is it real? Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's really an amazing thing. If you talk to anybody, and I've talked to a lot of people, they all believe pastors get all these tax breaks. The church is tax-free, pastors are tax-free, and it's just not true. So I had a year where I was thinking I should write a book. So I was going to help the bivocational pastors. Nobody helps these guys. They're called by God. They have a living. They're getting some bucks from the church, maybe $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a month. They're just paying tax on it, but they don't know what to do. And there's nobody on those small churches to advise them. So I figured, okay, I'm going to help them. So I ran the numbers. I'm a tax guy. And I finally set up a sample program to do a mechanic and a pastor. And I ran the numbers, and it just shocked me what I found out. So I came up with this question. And I'll ask you, Pastor, you're a pastor and you make $50,000. And I set it at 50 because the median from the study I took was like $51,000 for the average pastor in America. Yeah. And so all these people think pastors make hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, maybe the top 1 or 5% do. But for everybody else, the other 95% of pastors, they're all trying to make a living and trying to support their family and barely being able to do it. The pastors are starving. The churches can barely afford to pay them a salary. They can't reimburse them for all their expenses. So what's a pastor to do? And there's nobody for them to ask. So in running the numbers and formulating the question, it's, Pastor, you make $50,000 a year. Half of your income is a $25,000 tax-free housing allowance. So your W-2 says $25,000 on it. I'm a mechanic. I make $50,000, the same amount. So my W-2 says $50,000. When we go to file our tax returns, who pays more?
The mechanic.
Of course, not. It's obvious, but you would think pastors and administrators and people that do this for a living would know the answer to that question. I asked 400 people over the last year that same question, and every one of them got it wrong. Because the pastor pays more. And whether it's $1,068 or $11, it depends a little bit, but it's over $1,000. And as their income goes up to about $100,000, $125,000 a year with the housing allowance, the amount gets more. It can be almost $3,000 difference where the pastor pays more. And it's because of a simple fact. The pastorate is the only profession in the United States where the employer is forbidden by law from withholding Social Security and Medicare tax from them. The pastor has to pay both halves themselves, just like a regular self-employed person with, the sole proprietor, Schedule C on your tax return if you want to know where that's at. So on the pastor's example, where he makes $50,000, $25,000 is tax-free, and he only has a W-2 for $25,000, when you put it on your tax return, there's no taxable income if he's married. But he still pays $7,065 in self-employment tax. And the mechanic, he'll owe a couple $1,000s in taxes, but the subtraction for Social Security out of his paycheck is only, $3,825.
Wow.
So it's $5,900 or $6,000 versus $7,000.
Wow.
And he doesn't pay a dime in income tax. And nobody seemed to know this in the pastorate. All 400 people, after I told them, they'd say, oh yeah, I guess, we do pay that. Well, the pastorate is a whole separate division of the tax law. Back in the beginning, pastors basically were supported by the congregations, not the church. And that metamorphosized over the years to where when they had Social Security after the Depression and that, they wanted to make a way for pastors, missionaries to get in and contribute to a retirement system, because otherwise there's no hope other than the parishioners supporting them in retirement. Well, so they made the self-employment tax and allowed pastors and missionaries to contribute to it. Well, they had to do the 15.3%. Well, years later, they came up with the fact that, Are we employees or self-employed? We're paying self-employment tax. Well, they came up with this harebrained idea that they're both. So you get a W-2 as a pastor with one number in box 1, your salary, net of your housing allowance and any benefits, and nothing else on the W-2, unless the church elects to withhold taxes from you. And then that would go in box 2.
Wow.
Well, everybody thinks, well, then you can just treat them like a regular employee and take out Social Security and Medicare. Oh, no contraire. If you take out the 15%, the 7.65%, you have to add it into their federal withholding. You can't put it on the other part. And so that's for a whole nother subject, and we're getting too long on that.
Well, coming out of chapter 1, what's one action step or recommendation that you could give the reader, the person watching this video? What's something they could do to start taking action on managing their taxes well?
Number 1, take accountability for your financial situation instead of giving it to somebody else. If you just take your taxes and drop it off at some tax preparer's office, you're an idiot, and it's going to cost you thousands of dollars potentially. Because if they're not asking you questions about how your salary package is structured, are you married, what's your wife make, blah, 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 do you have kids, your package isn't structured correctly. Your tax preparer should be helping you structure your salary package because the church administrator probably isn't, and if you're in a small church, you don't have one. You're on your own. So where are you going to get help? So my advice is, number 1, learn enough, read the book, go over the videos, call us. I mean, go on our website.
So with that said, then, to wrap up the summary of chapter 1, if you want to know how you could potentially save thousands of dollars on your tax returns, go to taxscott.com.
Yes, and take responsibility for your own tax situation. And I'll leave it with this, the parable of the talents. Did this at a couple of district conferences. Say, pastors, if Christ came back and judged you on the stewardship, not of the church, but of your own personal finances, which servant would you be? The one who made 10 talents on the talent, number 2 that made 5, or number 3 that buried your head in the sand and didn't take any responsibility for your own tax situation? I guess you all know which one you are. And there was dead silence in the room because you all know that it's easier to hand off the responsibility than to take it. And you require responsibility and accountability from your parishioners. It's time to take it and apply it to yourself when it comes to your tax situation.
Agreed. Awesome. Go to taxscott.com, and we'll see you at the end of chapter 2.